how do you teach entrepreneurs to sell themselves, to believe in themselves, to balance their time, to create culture within their company from the start? There's so many factors that aren't always considered in the teaching process. And that was what I really wanted to build out to, one, differentiate us from others, but two, really give as great an experience as possible to help these entrepreneurs and to also set the right expectations for themselves.
In this episode, we're joined by Natalie Shmulik, the Chief Strategy and Incubation Officer at the Hatchery Chicago. Natalie's journey in the food industry began with running her own restaurant in Toronto, then discovering her passion for helping other entrepreneurs innovate and grow. She's partnered with major CPG companies, taught at Boston University, and played a key role in building the Hatchery into a thriving space for food startups. In this conversation, Natalie reveals what it really takes to launch a successful venture, like knowing your strengths, learning to pivot, and embracing collaboration. You'll hear her insights on balancing mental health and leadership, plus strategies for creating jobs and opportunities in underserved communities. I'm Laurette Rondonnet, and I can't wait for you to hear from this brilliant builder and champion of food entrepreneurs.
I'm originally from Toronto, Canada, but I've been in the States for about 12 years now. And when I was in Canada, originally I wanted to go into the world of writing, and the particular segment was in theater. So I ended up going to school for theater, specifically in playwriting. I went to York University, and through that program, I learned so much about myself. But then I also realized there's something more to this that I want to explore, and the writing piece felt a little bit more like a hobby. There was something else I just wanted to dive into. So I took on a second major in English literature. And through that, I started just exploring, and I loved kind of breaking apart words and understanding how different words with different meanings can have different effects on people. And I remember in my last year, I took a course called Food Writing, and I swear I thought this class was about critiquing restaurants, which at the time was a very prestigious role. I think it's a bit of a dying art form. You have a lot of bloggers, and you've got social media right now where everybody's a critic. Certainly we are in some way. But at the time, I was so excited about that space. Of course, to my surprise, the course had nothing to do with critiquing restaurants. It had everything to do with understanding the role food plays in different parts of literature. So we studied food and religion. We studied the Torah, the Vedas, the Bibles, the Quran, and how food plays such an impactful role. We studied food in Shakespeare.
It does go with, food is like the connector of community around the table.
Yeah, and it has such a big impact, and it really is sprinkled in everything we do. We just don't always give it the attention it deserves. And I think what really sparked my interest of going much deeper into the food and beverage industry was when we were learning about the concept of, in historical religious texts, the Garden of Eden, and the idea that humans were given one flaw, as how I perceived it. Our one flaw is appetite. We have this kind of voraciousness, we have this hunger inside us, and we can apply that to food and everything we do of what are we hungry for. And then the one item that humans were told you cannot have in relation to appetite is food. And that got my mind really going and thinking, gosh, there's so much to this, and there's so much about how we live our lives, and what does appetite and hunger mean, and what am I hungry for? That is what really kind of sparked that area of interest and where I wanted to really understand the food and beverage industry. And at that time, I had already worked in the food service space. So I worked in restaurants. I was a cashier at a deli. I was a busser. I remember when I was first given the chance to be a busser, I was so excited. I wanted to move so fast. I remember then I was promoted to a waitress, and that's where I started really interacting with people and learning about all of the different characteristics and how do you own a table? How do you use psychology in some ways to influence an order? And I remember as I would work my way up and through there was a point where I wanted to understand what happens on the back end now. How does this operate? How do restaurants really work? And so at the time I had decided I want to figure out how to run this business. I was quite naive and I thought, I can do this. This is no problem. Which in some ways worked in my favor, because if I had to do it again now, I would not do it. And I do think for most entrepreneurs, you have to have this level of naivety to just say, yeah, I can do it. Sure. I mean, to this day, if you know every single detail of what would be required to run the company, you may reconsider.
It might do something else.
Yes. So I think in that sense, not knowing really helped me take the leap into running a restaurant. And so at the time, I did know enough to know I didn't want to start from scratch. So I started researching franchises. And then I found one franchise that was quite new in Toronto. It was a breakfast and lunch franchise. And I decided this is what I want to go into, opened the restaurant. I always say it was kind of the best and worst years of my life. It was my personal MBA into the space. But my goodness, it gave me so many insights into what I did know, what I didn't know, what I needed to know.
How did you fund that?
Loans, savings, I mean, just across the board family.
Because I imagine you were young at this point.
Oh, yeah, very young. I was in my early 20s.
Wow.
So.
That's impressive.
Thank you. I don't know. There was something about that point where everything's exciting, everything's a learning opportunity, and there's also that flexibility to make mistakes. I do sometimes wish I could bring that back into my life a little bit more. And I do try to remember those moments of it is okay to make those mistakes, welcome them, because sometimes I think as we learn more, we feel that there's less opportunity to make those mistakes because we feel like, well, I should know better. But in reality, that's where the learning comes from. And that's something I tell the entrepreneurs we work with all the time. And I welcome those kinds of, even with my team now, I encourage people to try things and make mistakes, but learn from them, memorialize them, and then what do we do to improve it going forward? But with the restaurant, it was a great experience and I learned so much. And I think the biggest value it gave me is what does it mean to be an entrepreneur? What does it take? What are the challenges that you face? And then in my second year of running the restaurant, I was approached by Longo's, which is the major supermarket chain in Toronto. And they were at the time trying to figure out ways to introduce new products to consumers. It was kind of the standard, especially at that time, papayas were new. I mean, there were all these new items that they weren't quite sure how to introduce this to customers where they would add it to their shopping list, which they come in ready, they know what they want. How do we bring new concepts into their dining at home?
Please take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe. It helps us to reach more viewers and to get amazing guests like Natalie.
And I ended up working there for a while in consumer education. And we started thinking about how we did demos in store, how we would run cooking classes, I would even write for the flyers and the pamphlets that went out. And that I really enjoyed because my worlds of writing and love of food kind of went together. And then I just had a moment where I thought, I could keep doing this for the rest of my life. I could keep running this restaurant, doing some fun side projects here and there, but I just felt like there was more. There was something that was bubbling under the surface in the food and beverage industry, and I wanted to really explore that. And I went back to the professor who I took the food writing course with, and he actually said, you may want to go further into academia and explore courses around this. And at the time, there were a few classes. There was a program in Italy. There was a program at Boston University. But it ended up going between master's in gastronomy at Boston University or a food journalism course at NYU. And the gastronomy program just really sounded interesting. It was founded by Julia Child and Jacques Pepin.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's a program a lot of people don't know about.
I had never heard of it.
Yeah. So I ended up enrolling, I got accepted, sold the restaurant, used it to pay my tuition, which tuition in the States is much more expensive than it is in Canada.
Yeah. Why the heck didn't you?
We didn't have anything like that in Canada, which is a shame. I went to George Brown College and took some courses there for a while. It's very culinary focused, but something really about gastronomy and the weight that holds.
I think for our listeners, you got to describe what is gastronomy.
To different people, it means different things. To me, it really embodies the concept of food and culture. You know, you think of the godfather of gastronomy as like Ferran Adrià and all these amazing, and of course, Grant Achatz and what the incredible things they do, but it is all encompassing. It's food in the senses. It's this experiential moment of the food does more than just satiate you. It looks a certain way. It can deceive you in some ways where it might look like one thing but taste like something else and smell a certain way, and how they play with aromas. Even the fact that they make their own plateware and every detail of what's in front of you has been so thoroughly thought through.
I've heard of a restaurant where you eat in the dark.
Dining in the dark, I think they either travel or they do have them in different cities. And again, that's a whole other experience. If you're not seeing what you're eating.
We do a lot of sensory work at Edlong, and obviously if you're trying to tell a difference between some samples, and if the color is different, you got to turn the red lights on so people can't tell that the color is different or whatever. Tasting stuff tastes like orange, but it's pink. It's so amazing how our brains
does something to your mind.
work.
Yeah. I mean, because there are so many things that are already programmed and that we learn. I mean, they're some for the best and some for the worst in some ways, where we almost become so rigid in our thinking because we feel this is how it should be. But for somebody to break that mold and introduce a whole other concept, how fascinating. These are all of these incredible components of life that are influenced by where food sources were, so how different populations would build their colonies, build their communities based on the food sources they had. So whether you were by water or by land, and how that would influence so much. I remember reading the book Salt and learning how much salt influenced different dining experiences, how we collected food, how we preserved food, even names of food. The Latin term sal, which is salt, that's where the term salad came from, which was salted greens.
Oh.
Salad. So it's just so interesting, all the history and how we behave today was very much a result of what we ate, where we got the food, how we ate the food. So I really fell in love with that. And the program was very helpful in the sense of it gave me the freedom to take all of that information. So it gives you the knowledge, and then you have to figure out how to apply that knowledge. And that was important to me. And I feel I have a lot to contribute, a lot to still learn, because if I stop learning,
You're definitely a learner. I mean, even going back to school and picking that new, different major. So then you graduate.
Graduated. I also learned tricks from my father. So I found some fun ways to kind of work the system. So I became the president of the Gastronomy Student Association. And I realized I could maybe use that title to get access to different opportunities. So I ended up working for Harvard Common Press and cookbook publishing. I worked with Food 52 with recipe development. And then I ended up reaching out to the Specialty Food Association. I was the only one at the time who's ever done this, apparently, from a student group. And I said, I've heard about this thing, the Fancy Food Show. I think it's funny now because it's one of my favorite shows.
It's an amazing show.
The best. And we exhibit there now. So it just feels so full circle. But I said, is there any chance you can give free tickets to myself and 10 other students who are part of this student association? And they agreed. And at the time it was in Washington, which it's no longer, but at the time it was in Washington, D.C. And talk about bringing the cuisine to you, the whole Italian section and the Japan section. It's a wonderland. And for a bunch of students who honestly don't have much to offer these brands, we're just going around thinking it's Halloween.
Awareness of you know what I mean?
Yes.
Awareness of the industry
awareness.
And bringing, succession planning. Kind
Exactly.
of getting you guys into it.
And it worked. I mean, it was a long-term investment
Exactly.
on SFA's part, but
Yes.
turned out to work great because we helped them launch Incubator Village eventually. So that was a great experience. And from there, I started trying to think more about how do I actually use this degree and this knowledge that I have. And from there, I was back in Boston and I went into a cafe, I think it was Crepe Cafe, and they had this beautiful bottle. It was a wine bottle and it was filled with tea. And I started reading about it and I thought, gosh, how beautiful is this bottle? This brand is so interesting. Again, being a little bit naive, I ended up emailing the company and I said, I love your brand. I'd love to learn more about this and see if there's any opportunity to collaborate with you. And Evie, who was the founder, had said, this is such great timing. I'm actually going through some changes and transformations with the brand. Let's meet for coffee. And we did. We renamed it, rebranded, and all of these were still new skills to me, but I felt I could do it. And I felt I always had a good eye for just how a brand can really impact a consumer's behavior and interest.
And yet you didn't have any real marketing.
No. I took some marketing courses. I took some branding courses. So I was kind of taking just my intuition around it.
Well, you probably
Yeah, which we all do. I think it's important to realize we are all consumers as well. So there is something to be said about everyone's opinion. But knowing which opinion to take and which to leave behind is the tricky part, especially for early stage brands, because you want to ask everybody everything, but you also have to be careful to protect your idea and to know, is this advice really helping me, or is this something that doesn't align with my vision? And that's always a tough thing to navigate.
And protect is a big word and if it's a great idea, someone can steal it from you.
That's true.
Which is a horrible thought, but people do.
But I had such a great experience working with Evie. It was so great to also see some of my work be directly applied to a brand. So having that real world interaction of, if I do this, this is the result. And that ultimately, getting to keep trying that helped me see how those ideas, one, come to life, and two, do they work, do they not work, why or why not? And after that, I realized I loved the consumer packaged goods space. That was my first experience working in consumer packaged goods. And I wanted to do more of that. And it wasn't just the experience of rebuilding the brand, it was also working with an entrepreneur, because I could see what she was going through. And I related so much back to when I was running the restaurant, where I thought, my gosh, I can help her with these things, but maybe I can also help her find some balance and approach this in a way that isn't always stressful and overwhelming, because that is the feeling. And that's how I felt. I felt I was probably stressed all the time, and it became my new baseline. When I was running the restaurant, I just assumed this is what life is. You just have to deal with it. And in some ways, yes, but in some ways, I don't know. I don't think we have to destroy ourselves to build a successful brand.
No, and I think that even sounds like we talk about visionaries and integrators in the Edlong world and in traction mindset world, and almost sounds like you might have been her integrator. Like, if she was the visionary, you were kind of grounded her and got stuff done.
And I think sometimes too is just knowing that there's somebody who understands, just even as a sounding board where she could share, these are the challenges I'm facing. And I think sometimes just having that is a huge relief. So after that, I started kind of diving into the world of consumer packaged goods. And then an opportunity arose to move to Chicago to work for a for-profit business incubator in Evanston. And I took it because the opportunity was, you're going to get to work with hundreds of startups. Moved to Chicago, didn't know anyone. It was all brand new. I still, to this day, there's something about moving to a new city that's very exciting. And I do love Chicago. It's a beautiful city. And so I was at that incubator for about 2 years. And through there is where there was a day where myself and the owner of that incubator went to tour the Make City Incubator, which is run by ICNC, the company I currently work for. And I met the executive director, Steve DeBretto, and he gave us a tour of the incubator. That space, Make City, is actually one of the oldest and largest business incubators in the country. It's kind of a really well-kept secret in a funny way. It's all for light manufacturers. So anybody who has a manufacturing business and needs a place to call home, they'll come to Make City, and then they'll move into one of the spaces. And over the last several years, I would say 10 to 12 years now, there's been a drastic increase in food and beverage companies operating out of there. That facility is an old plumbing foundry, so not ideal for food and beverage production. And what ultimately was the catalyst for the Hatchery was that space created two options for entrepreneurs. You'd have food and beverage companies coming there and realizing, I need to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars to build out a commercial grade food and beverage production space, or I can't afford it, and then we would never see them again. Now, so many incredible brands have come out of there and are still there. Farmer's Fridge is based out of there. Metric Coffee is there, Reinhold Distillery. The intention of, as with all incubators, is that brands should eventually graduate out of the space. But certainly within that space, there are brands, those who are in food and beverage, who've invested a lot of capital. So they are there for a longer period of time. We call them anchor tenants now. And they also give back. They're really eager to share their experiences with some of the earlier stage brands as they're coming through.
And mentor them. That's great.
And that's what we want. We want it to be very cyclical of, hey, let's help you get to where you need to be so that you can help the next person coming through the pipeline. And when we walked through the space at the time, Steve DeBretto had said, we have this idea for a dedicated food and beverage incubator because we know it's a need just based off of what we're seeing here. And we've partnered with another organization called Allies for Community Business, which is a nonprofit microlender. So they'll provide small business loans to early stage companies that often aren't bankable, which is a big challenge in the industry. When you're in very early stages and you need the money to get started, you're going to the bank and they're saying, well, we need proof of your concept before we can give you the loan and capital that you need.
And collateral.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not accessible to everybody. And A4CB, Allies for Community Business, kind of fits that gap that we have in the market right now where they say, yes, we will take the risk. They don't base it on credit scores. I mean, they really are willing to take a chance on startups to give them the capital they need to get on their feet and get their business growing. So when Steve had mentioned this to me, he had reached out after and said, hey, I'd love to just pick your brain about this concept and learn a little bit more about your background because your expertise seems to lend itself really well here. When he told me about the idea that they had for this new incubator, and he had said, hey, we've got incubation experience, we've got the finance experience, we're missing a little bit of that food and beverage experience. And he asked if I'd be interested in helping. And I said, absolutely. What a chance in a lifetime to build something from nothing. And I came on as a contractor to start, and I had a blank slate, and I could start thinking through, what do the programs look like? What do entrepreneurs need? What did I need when I was running the restaurant? What did I need when I was trying to deal with this challenge or this challenge? And I started building out the program. We did a ton of feasibility studies where we didn't want to just create something that we felt was necessary. We also wanted to make something that entrepreneurs genuinely needed, that expressed interest in. So I remember at the time, the goal was we were going to build out the program and launch it once the building was built. And I thought, gosh, I think we're going to miss an opportunity here. And I said, I think we need to launch this as a program now, learn from it, and use those learnings while we're building the new facility, because that will also influence the design of the building. And we did. And that in turn resulted in several entrepreneurs coming to classes. We started with our Starting a Food Business class, which we still run to this day. And it's one of my favorite classes to teach. And you can just see everybody's coming in so new and fresh, and they've got these ideas. And this is kind of their first step of bringing it to life. And that energy is amazing.
So they're just coming with the concept.
Yeah, for most, some have already started a few steps, but most of the people who attend our Starting a Food Business class, they're either in the very, very early phases where maybe they just registered their business entity, they're looking into the insurance, they're starting to build out the recipe. For others, they just think, gosh, I've always wanted to do this and I don't know where to start. And that's their start, is coming to that class. It's amazing the people who come to this. We've had everybody and anybody come to these classes. For some, it genuinely is, I want to start a business. I didn't know where to go. This is my first step. Entrepreneurship is very sexy. Starting a business sounds very glamorous. Running a business, very different story, as you know.
Exactly. So at this point, before you built the Hatchery, so your role? I
was a contractor. I was a contractor on a TN visa from Canada.
Wow.
So really just on, biding my time and loving the work and loving building this. And we also really wanted to be intentional as we were thinking about the concept of what the mission is. Very intentional about the location. The Hatchery is located in East Garfield Park, which was very embedded into the goals that Steve and at the time Robin Lee Greiner really wanted to infuse into what the Hatchery as an incubator would be, which is there are several communities and individuals who do not get access to resources, to funding, to opportunities. And when we looked at neighborhoods that could best benefit from those resources, we identified the west side of Chicago, which has traditionally been an underinvested neighborhood, has some of the highest unemployment rates, very limited access to nutritious foods. We found there were more liquor stores than there are grocery stores. But what's amazing in the neighborhood is there's so many talented entrepreneurs who are already cooking, catering, making products in their homes. They've just never been given the opportunity to operate out of a commercial kitchen. So they're limited to what they have. And in many ways, if Department of Health finds out and shuts them down, that's it. It's game over. And so we wanted to be in and a part of that neighborhood where we could have open doors to West Side residents, primarily BIPOC entrepreneurs who could come through and actually get what they needed to. So our goal was, let's equip you with the tools you need. You keep doing what you're doing, but let's get you all of those other pieces so that you can create a successful business, and hopefully a business has generational impact, that infuses more opportunity into the community, whether it's job opportunities, whether it's financial opportunities. And that was really powerful to be able to provide that kind of a resource to a community that otherwise, you might have to drive 3 hours to get to the nearest shared kitchen. That's not really conducive to a successful business.
Brilliant. And it seems like it really did impact that community for sure. So talk a little bit about how you guys fund the structure of the hatchery. I think that's kind of interesting.
Yeah. So in the early days, the project itself was overall a $34 million project. And so pretty significant. We received a lot of support from the city. It was incredible. The city wanted to back us immediately and provided us with support for land acquisition. And then the next step was, how do we find the right partners? And it was a combination of foundation partners and corporate partners. And luckily, because we had launched the program virtually already and didn't wait until the building.
And so by launching virtually, you mean that's just classes at that point? Just classes. So you're kind of getting your community together.
Exactly. Yeah. This is where people are starting to learn about us. They're coming to a class. We're running the classes out of the Make City Incubator.
Okay.
But we don't have a shared kitchen yet. We don't have anything.
No location. Okay.
Yes. And what was interesting is their attention started to form and people started reaching out to us.
That was a brilliant idea to set up the community before the location.
If we had waited till the building was completed, we would have had to make many, many infrastructure changes, for one, which is very expensive. And two, our programming would have looked very different because we wouldn't have had the learnings of what's working for the entrepreneurs, what information is relevant to them and what isn't, and how are we teaching it. And that's influenced how we run our programming today. And from that point, from day 1 too, I looked at so many other incubators, programs, accelerators, classes. There's so much out there. What was missing is, how do you teach entrepreneurs to sell themselves, to believe in themselves, to balance their time, to create culture within their company from the start? There's so many factors that aren't always considered in the teaching process. And that was what I really wanted to build out to, one, differentiate us from others, but two, really give as great an experience as possible to help these entrepreneurs and to also set the right expectations for themselves. What do you envision? Why are you in this? And how do you capture that now so that when you are dealing with tremendous challenges, you can reference back to your why and the reason you're doing it, and you can navigate the space without burning out entirely, or unfortunately, in some cases, the whole business ends up falling apart because the founder is just doing everything all the time and not really taking a step back to figure out their own needs.
Wanting to do everything, not delegating, not knowing what to delegate can be a disaster for an entrepreneur. So do you have mentorship with them?
We do, yeah. And we lean on people like yourselves. A lot of our partners, they'll come in and they want to give back and they want to support. And we do try to spend as much time vetting those resources and individuals as possible to make sure it is a good fit. And to each person, one person will work well, there will be a connection there, and one person might not, which is why we have a wide range of resources, even with attorneys that we work with. different styles work for different people. And that's important for the entrepreneurs to realize as well early on, because sometimes you make a decision out of duress that doesn't always have great results. It's okay to take a moment and go, I don't have a good feeling about working with this person. That's okay.
So now what's your role?
So my role has evolved many times. Yes. So once the building was complete, this was around 2017.
The building opened.
The building didn't open yet. The building opened soon after, but this is when we formed an entity. So the building, we had formed the entity, and at the time, we had a board formed. The board was part ICNC board members, part Allies for Community Business board members, because it's a joint venture. And then they opened the role. They said, we're looking to hire the CEO of the organization. It was a 501c3. I actually didn't apply originally.
Really?
I don't know what it was. I always saw myself as a builder. I wanted to create something and then move on to the next thing. And I was on a visa. I just thought that would be a big risk for them to take. So I actually didn't apply, and I really appreciated Steve and a couple others came up to me and said, hey, we noticed you didn't apply for the role.
Like, what are you thinking?
Yeah, and I thought, I didn't even know it was available to me to apply. And then I got to thinking, and I got really excited about it. So I applied for it, and I ended up, and there were some incredible candidates. I was very humbled by the immense amount of applications that came through for that role. And I was so honored that they...
So that's the title was CEO of Hatchery.
Title was CEO of the Hatchery. I'm already running this and leading it, and I've got the ideas, and I'm bringing them to life, and brought in a ton of partners. We brought in Kellogg's at the time as a sponsor, ConAgra, and it was through the programming that I'd launched where they heard about us. And I always laugh because there were a few people, I always think at the time Ingredion had expressed interest, and they always said, we were shocked when we had asked to schedule a meeting with you, because they met me in a tiny, tiny office that wasn't my office. It was just at Make City, and it was me. It was one person. And we thought this was an enormous company. We did not realize. So it was amazing that we built such a reputation already.
And a brand.
And I loved that. It's to this day, I still love that piece of it.
Yeah, that is very true. You did. Because I remember when all this was going on, and I was like, there was a lot of buzz.
Yeah.
Good buzz, the Hatchery.
And that's what I was hoping for. And so I think that allowed me to fill that role a little bit more seamlessly, because I was already doing most of that work. And my goodness, that was quite the transition into that role. I had never run a nonprofit. I'd never worked for a nonprofit organization at that time. Never led a board before. There were so many, had to hire a whole new team, start everything from scratch. And it kind of took me back to the restaurant days. And I thought, whoa, I remember some of this, but my goodness, the undertaking of just the amount of paperwork and the setup. And sometimes, and I'm very much the person where I want to run with things. I always start, what can I skip?
Exactly.
What can I jump over? I just want to get to the end. And that's very much my personality type. And I learned a lot through some of the tests as well, like Hogan test and DISC assessment is I am the, at all costs, just go and do it. I move fast. I always have moved fast. And
then having to have a board, I'm following you, like in just governance and...
You have to slow down.
Yes.
You have to slow down. And slowing down I appreciate slowing down much more now. But I did at the time operate at such a high speed of just going. And sometimes, things kind of fall to the wayside and you just don't have enough time to stop and pick it up and fix it. Now I try to be a lot more intentional. But entrepreneurship is speed.
It is.
Right? Speed to market. It's you have the idea. Now you got to get all those pieces together. But it can be quite daunting. Mm-hmm. So through that, I learned a lot. And then... I think both in managing the board, I think about it, I did feel I was very different. I was very timid. I remember just talking to the board and trying to explain what we were doing. And I always came in feeling insecure and in some ways having imposter syndrome of, oh my gosh, I have all this responsibility and this big role. I need to really prove myself, rather than thinking, I've already proven myself. Let me show you what else I'm doing and what else I can do and get input. I was really kind of at the service and of the board and trying to just make sure I was appeasing everybody. And it just didn't feel right, because I also felt as though I'm spending so much time trying to be good at managing a board that I'm not spending a lot of time being good at leading a company.
And doing the job that you love. Especially you hear from publicly traded companies of how much time they have to spend presenting to their board instead of doing the job.
Instead of doing the work, yeah. And there are some talented people who know how to lead a board remarkably.
Right. That would not be me
and
either.
That is not me either.
Yeah, when I was president of the FEMA board too, I knew going into that, so that's the flavor and extract one, not the other FEMA, that there was going to be a challenge. It's so different to run your own company versus be a president of a board. Yeah. And it's slow. It's like moving the Titanic.
Yeah.
You got to have like one or two things you want to get done, and that's it. Because if you go scatter, you're not going to get anything done.
It's right. And there's a lot of voices in the room.
A lot of voices. Totally understand sitting at the table and being like intimidated for sure. And finding your voice, and you just got to get brave and say it,
Yeah, but it took a lot of coaching and learning for me to learn how to get to the point where I could use my voice.
Did you have a good coach?
I had a phenomenal coach. I was very lucky. The first year, I struggled a lot. I really was down on myself. I felt like I was failing the team. I felt like I was failing the board. I was failing myself. I questioned, what am I doing here? Really had some difficult moments. And at that point, one of the things I'm very thankful for is I've become friends with a lot of the entrepreneurs that I've worked with.
That are members in the Hatchery.
Many used to be members, and I've learned so much from them, probably more than they've learned from me.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. And a few of them actually recommended Verde, which is a executive coaching group, and they specifically Laura was working with many of the big food and beverage CEOs, Simple Mills, Farmer's Fridge, RX Bar. And so she was already well known in the industry, and a few people had said, you may want to reach out to her. And I remember scheduled an appointment and sat with her, and it became more of a therapy session than a coaching session.
Of course it would. Of course. It's a fine line.
It is a fine line. I mean, she was my therapist, truly, for a couple of years. I learned so much about myself, and it was very comforting to also hear her perspective of here's what's working and what you're doing, and here's what isn't, and here's where the emotion is coming in. Here's how you're feeling about it, but here's what the reality is. The best thing that I always keep with me is when she taught me the difference between managing and leading, and she had said to me, you need to understand that you're mixing everything together, and you are so strong at certain roles. And there are roles that it's okay, you don't have to be that strong in them. And she said, you are a phenomenal leader. You can lead anybody into anything, convince them, motivate them, get them to follow you. She said, but you're a horrible manager.
They call it LMA, so it's leadership, management, and accountability. And some people are phenomenal at it.
Yes.
And it's great to know what you love. So how does that fit in relation to managing the board? It was more management.
Managing the board and even managing the team, because I was always close. To this day, I'm still so close. I love my team members, and I want to inspire them and motivate them. But that is a very different role than it is to manage conflicts amongst team members, or manage the schedule in the right way amongst team members. And a lot of those, I've built those skills over time as well. But I much prefer getting the team excited than now here's all of the structure associated with you going and doing this and you going and doing this.
Execution?
I love the execution. It's such an essential step. But there's so many pieces of, again, building out a standard operating procedure, making sure that you're building it into policy, making sure there's consistency. That stuff is, it can weigh you down. It's essential, and I know that. Am I the best at it? No. And I remember working with my coach and thinking, it's scary sometimes to hear your flaws, but I actually thought it was so empowering. There was a moment of going, oh my gosh, I'm not good at that. Great. I don't need to be good at that.
It's liberating.
It is very liberating.
I'm with you.
And that's when I really got a chance to sit down and go, am I in the right role and am I doing the right things? Because I was pulled so far away from doing the stuff I love for more of these administrative pieces, which are essential to run a business.
You needed an integrator. You're the visionary, and now you needed that integrator that you were for.
That's exactly how I feel.
Yes. Because you, it sounds like you grew to that through the experiences. And then you needed a youngin to come up and say, I'll do the integrator stuff for you.
And I'm very lucky because I have a team now that is very good at integrating, because I love the visioning piece. And I missed the direct interactions. I barely got to speak with the entrepreneurs at that point.
Because you were buried in admin.
And I wanted my hands to be dirty. I wanted to get in there and build things.
It's like hiding your light under a bushel to have you in an admin role, I think.
That is truly how it felt. And that's where I started to come to terms with that. But then it's a whole other thing to say, wow, okay, so maybe I'm not in the right role, but how does one say I shouldn't be running this business anymore? But I had a great conversation with various board members, great conversation with Steve. And the other thing that was helpful is I love to analyze and I love to kind of break things apart and figure out what is working here and what isn't. And I was also able to see many flaws in how we were operating, where we were duplicating so many efforts. And that cost a lot more money to duplicate accounting, because we had multiple entities. We had the joint venture, we had ICNC, A4CB, title holding. There's so many.
It's confusing.
It's confusing. There's a lot of different parts. But then again, by being our own entity, we're also now answering to multiple entities, and we're also still doing accounting and all of these other roles that probably could have been merged. And I remember during the pandemic, where it was kind of the right time, where so many things were changing, it was the right time to make that change for us as well, where I said, I think it's the best move for us to integrate back into ICNC, because ICNC is already a leader in incubation. Let's have ICNC take over this, and I will work with ICNC and can oversee both of the incubators rather than just focusing on the hatchery. And Steve was very generous, and he had said, I think it's a bigger role for you, but I also recognize optics, and to the rest of the world, I don't want it to look like you somehow got a demotion. And so he had said, what do you want your role to be? Which is a very lucky place to be in.
That's
to
beautiful, to craft your own, yes.
So I thought about the words that mean a lot to me and what I wanted to be. And so we came up with Chief Strategy and Incubation Officer for ICNC.
Beautiful.
And
it's beautiful.
I got to get back into the work, the project work, which is what I love. Now I also have more freedom to do more of the things I love. I've got to be 2 years ago, I started as an adjunct professor for the same program that I took.
That's awesome.
And so right now we're in the middle of the semester. I'm running a food entrepreneurship course.
So Natalie, what do you see as the future for the hatchery?
Right now, the focus is very much on being and continuing to be as entrepreneur-centric as we can be, because we hear so many issues that entrepreneurs are facing, whether it is distribution fees, challenges with getting into retail, direct-to-consumer, being asked for free product, for discounts, all of these other things. And I think that stifles innovation in so many ways. And so it's our job as an incubator to look at policy, to better understand how do we streamline certain processes, how do we better inform entrepreneurs so that they're also instilling safety protocols into their production without it being overly costly and overwhelming. So we're always trying to adapt our programming and our resources to best support the entrepreneurs. And part of that too is just advocating on their behalf. We have an advocacy team that focuses on what are the challenges entrepreneurs are facing and what role can we play to try to make, even if it's small changes along the way. But we do have great contacts at BACP and Department of Health. And so we want to work with the city. We want to work with the state. We want to work federally. We want to inform governing bodies of the plight of entrepreneurship, because these entrepreneurs are coming in wanting to solve real problems. They want to feed people good food, but my goodness, it is really difficult to do that when you are getting hit with something every step of the way. A big part of it's who you know and who you're connected to. And I think for the future, I would love to see a space where we can create a streamlined process, help entrepreneurs first, but also it's not even just in engaging and informing the entrepreneurs. It's also working with every single person in the ecosystem so we can create that awareness and have everybody work together, because it does feel very siloed at times and it feels everybody's looking out for themselves, and we can just do more if we're all working together.
And the Hatchery is just a perfect model for that to happen. You have the space, you have the people in the room that really can be collaborating and working together to solve these big problems.
Yeah, we never thought that some of the big consumer packaged goods brands that we work with, we didn't think, a Pepsi and a Conagra and now Kellanova would want to sit at a table together, but they do. They're all facing the same challenges.
So, Natalie, what is the legacy that you would like to leave behind?
Oh my gosh. I think for me, the most important thing is that as entrepreneurs, we're doing so much. And at times we kind of forget ourselves. And I'd love to see a space where we are embracing entrepreneurship, we are elevating entrepreneurship, we're celebrating entrepreneurship. But that really means understanding that to be an entrepreneur means you do not have to suffer. I think, unfortunately, that is the world we live in today, where we don't get into it assuming that it's going to be so difficult that it can be debilitating in many ways. I want it to be a space where people get back to that excitement, but that excitement stays. That opportunity of saying, I need a moment to take care of myself as the entrepreneur. I need a moment to find balance. I need to be able to lean on my team. It's okay for me to have flaws. Unfortunately, for especially leading large companies, the reputation that is out there is oftentimes, oh my goodness, they have to be emotionless, and you have to be so stern, and nothing can impact you, and you can't be vulnerable. And we're starting to see a bit of that shift, but I hope there is more of that, because there is something to be said at, yes, it's tough when you're sitting at the top and there's nowhere else to go from there. It's a very daunting experience, and you feel that you have to take everything that's coming at you. If customers have complaints, you are the last person they're going to. And I think if we can create an environment where we can be vulnerable as entrepreneurs, and we can create supportive communities for entrepreneurs where you have people that you can vent to, you can express things to, you can share ideas with and collaborate with. That collaboration is so important. But I hate to say it because it is such a buzzword right now, but I think mental health is so important. Balance and wellness and who we are, it's scary. I remember after the restaurant, I felt like I've lost 10 years of my life. And I just thought that's just part of the game. The part of the game is just you wear yourself down until there's nothing left. That doesn't help anybody.
And I think the other part of entrepreneurship or running a company is the responsibility of the weight of the world of all the people that are depending on you. Yeah. And I think that's probably where the manicness maybe comes from, because you don't want to disappoint the people depending on you. And learning how to delegate is another thing that we talk about a lot, that just like you were describing, of knowing what you're not great at and delegating that and finding what you do love and what brings you joy is going to help with the weight of the world on the role.
And it's okay if what brings you joy is also not running that business. Yes. You can find excitement and passion, but sometimes people are embarrassed to have passions outside of their work. You should. We hosted a panel that I called The Other Exit. There were all these panels about acquisitions and amazing exits. Nobody was really shining a light on the entrepreneurs who did run, in some cases, very successful businesses, but had to close down. It was kind of taboo, and nobody wanted to talk about that. So I thought, we need to talk about that. We brought 3 entrepreneurs, all of whom had successful businesses and unfortunately did have to close their business. Summit was pandemic. We had Greg from Pastoral, so many great brands. And it was probably one of my favorite panels, because each of them we said, if there's anything that you learned or could have done differently, what would it have been? All of them said they were so scared of letting their teams down that they kept the business running for as long as possible to the point where it was actually creating more harm. And the one thing they all said they would have changed is closing their business down sooner. But that's the pressure. That's that weight of the world that you're saying, where you feel that you have to keep this thing going for as long as possible, even if it is negatively impacting yourself, your team, and the business as a whole. But I think getting used to that of sometimes letting something go is an act of service.
Even I think of letting employees go, which is hell. Yeah. And knowing sometimes it's the best for both, and with grace and all of that. And they 9 times out of 10, they find something better that they love.
That's right. And it's such a hard place to be in because it's hard to see anything outside of right now. But it is important because you keeping someone that isn't serving you or the business, it is a disservice to them and their talent, because just like I learned, I was in a role that I probably shouldn't have been in. I was doing certain things that were taking me much longer to do because I wasn't skilled at it, and I was missing out on doing the things where I really could have tremendous impact. But it's hard to get out of our own way. And this is where I think the more we can normalize that and make it okay, where it's not always failure.
It's not a failure at all.
It's a learning, and it's an opportunity.
And a season of your life sometimes. And it's, change of seasons. Well, Natalie, this has been awesome. Really have enjoyed talking to you, and this conversation has been inspiring, as I knew it would be. So I would love for you to end on where people can find you.
So if anybody wants to find us, we're at thehatcherychicago.org. You can find us on social media. If anybody wants to connect with me on LinkedIn, I'm Natalie Shmulik on LinkedIn. I'm the only one. And we run a lot of different opportunities, whether it's an entrepreneur that's just looking for a place that they can be comfortable in and they can learn as much as possible, or if it's a company that wants to partner with us. We are a nonprofit organization, so we're always looking for industry experts, new opportunities, and opportunities to share with our members. And we also run immersion sessions where we introduce larger brands into the world of ideation, where they can take their team out of the 4 walls, come into an entrepreneurial environment, and really start to think about what else they want to create.
That's beautiful, because they don't have the opportunity to do that. And, like the Pepsis and the ConAgras of the world, it really gives them
And they've
freedom.
done immersions with us.
Oh, I love that. We got to think about that one.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. It's been great.
Thank you so much.
Natalie showed us just how much vision, tenacity, and heart go into building a thriving food business, and how important it is to recognize your strengths and lean on others when you're less effective. We also heard how the Hatchery helps break down barriers for new entrepreneurs, creating stronger communities and more jobs across Chicago. If today's chat resonated with you, head over to thehatcherychicago.org to see how you can support or collaborate. And be sure to connect with Natalie Shmulik on LinkedIn for ongoing inspiration and industry insights. Thanks for joining us on Owning Your Legacy, and don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring conversations. See you soon.